And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 126th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, January 28th, 2020, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, we're going to recap the improbable situation of what we talked about last week with the Michigan State game and Maryland game. Then we're going to kind of segue that into just talking more about how IU basketball is trending in the right direction overall. And we'll wrap it up with previewing the two road opponents this week against Penn State and Ohio State with some listener questions that we put out earlier today. Here with me tonight, though, I was trying to think of some clever Super Bowl analogy, but there's three of us here, and that wouldn't work as much. And so Nathan cleverly was just like could come up at the last second and just say committee, the backfield by committee. So I guess that's what we're gonna go with. I guess a quarterback, running back, and receiver or something like that with our impending Super Bowl week this week, which will be exciting. But Nathan, how are you doing this evening? You said you're a little under the weather, but other than
Yeah,
that, are you doing all right?
yeah, fighting through a little something here, but the San Francisco's got Mostert and Coleman and Breida, and
Yes,
it kind of
that is
works a
true.
little, sort of. But no, Indiana's in an interesting spot now, you guys. I mean, 1-1. We said last week that was okay. They didn't end up winning the game we thought they would win, but hey, look, 15-5, and an interesting week to come.
Exactly. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty okay. I'm still a little bit sad from the news on Sunday, as I'm sure all
Of
of us
course.
sports fans are. So, I can't go on Twitter for more than 3 seconds without seeing something about number 8 or 24, whoever you want to talk about. But yeah, so we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. But the last minutes of the Maryland game is just a blur to me.
Yeah. Especially, I even posted in. I think I was one of the first to post in our chat just to talk about it because I think all of our first reactions were just like, is this like a prank or a joke or
I thought it
something
was
like
fake news.
fake news? Exactly that people posted, and TMZ was the first to report, and usually
I think it's because it
TMZ.
was TMZ.
Yeah, but I mean TMZ you can be reliable at times, so that's why and then it just started to come in and it was I think there was like 10 or 15 minutes left in the second half. I think that's something like what it was. And there were definitely portions of that entire half where I just was not paying attention whatsoever, just trying to see what was going on. But of course, our condolences to the family, and it's just a sad moment in the sports world in general from Sunday, and it's going to be a sad moment for a long time. But we're going to trudge through. Thankfully, we're not doing this podcast the day of or the day after with everything that happened, and we get to look forward to the Super Bowl, let alone two road games
Sure.
this week. So, on a more positive note, one of the best football games, if not the best football game of the entire year. Matt, who are you got this week, the 49ers or the Chiefs?
See, my head tells me to go with the 49ers because they have the better defense, and defense wins championships. However, my heart tells me the Kansas City Chiefs because as an Eagles fan, I would like Andy Reid to at least get one.
That's true.
He's been so close. I remember staying up in 2004, as it was, and watching them get lose very closely to the Patriots. The Eagles did in the Super Bowl in Jacksonville, actually. And that was heartbreaking, and I think Andy deserves one. So I'm going to go Chiefs because I'm going to go with what my heart says, and I'll be right if my head tells me correctly that it's the 49ers.
Well, you got your revenge a couple years ago, but Nathan, 49ers or Chiefs?
Well, I think as a Bears fan, I'm a big fan of defense. So San Francisco's my pick. It's going to be a close game.
Oh, yeah.
I think San Francisco nips it at the end, though. Robbie Gold from distance to win it.
There you go. I'm going to pick the 49ers too, and let's go IU all the way. We'll get an IU player to win this year instead of just going to the Super Bowl last year. We'll get an IU player to win this year. All right, so let's talk about like we talked about last week. We thought 2-0 was there was almost a 0% chance Indiana was going to go 2-0 this past week when they were playing two home games against Michigan State and Maryland. Just the quality of opponent. for both of them. And then we thought obviously maybe the most realistic one was probably 1-1. And then of course going from there, the most realistic option from that was, of course they're going to beat Maryland and they're going to lose to Michigan State, because that's what you would have thought. But if it weren't for the last 65 seconds of the last minutes that the men's basketball team officially has played, then they actually would be 2-0. But of course, the last minute and 5 seconds happened at Maryland, and the Hoosiers ended up losing in literally the last minute of the game, 77-76. But before that, let's get into a little bit, because we definitely need to touch on the Indiana-Michigan State game. By the time you're listening to the podcast, it'll be almost a week since that game happened, but there's definitely a lot to take away, and it goes to the theme of this podcast as in trending in the right direction, because despite that Maryland loss, I think it's safe to say that they didn't lose the way they have been at the end of December / early January. But the performance against Michigan State, Matt, we saw this. First, I think it was great to see the students back. I think that was from tip off. It was the crowd was definitely not going to let the Hoosier fans or this Hoosier team lose it. But they stepped up. They were able to pull out a win against an incredibly tough opponent in the Big Ten, one that we thought would win the national championship. Of course, the expectations have kind of been lowered a little bit since the beginning of the year for Michigan State. But
Right.
Going up against Tom Izzo and a team that traditionally Indiana struggles with, was able to pull it out. Archie Miller is on a 3-game win streak against Michigan State, and the Hoosiers are defeating ranked opponents in Assembly Hall regardless of what the refs are giving them per se. It's not that
Sure.
the house of call at the moment. But Matt, what were your overall takeaways from the Michigan State game? What can they build off of as they're going forward?
I think what we can build off of is out rebounding a team that stresses rebounding. Michigan State's identity is play tough defense, play smart offense, and out rebound, get more possessions than the other team. That's what they do. That's what they've done for a very, very long time. That's Izzo basketball, right? You got to rebound the ball first. That is their priority at Michigan State. We out rebounded Michigan State by, I think it was 2 total rebounds, but we out rebounded them at home. And that's what you need to do against Michigan State. And a team like Michigan State, you need to take it to them. Joey Brunk had a fantastic game, 6 rebounds, 14 points, some really, really tough minutes there against a all-conference player in Xavier Tillman. Again, Rob Finney had probably his best game since he's come back from his injury. He had 8 points, 4 assists, had some really big shots, but also played some really clutch defense on Cassius Winston. And when you look at Cassius Winston's stat line, you go, oh, he had 17 points, but he had to work for those 17. Like every single time
sure.
down the court, he had to work. We had some huge minutes from guys like Armand, and Al hit some big shots as well. So everybody was clicking. Devontae didn't have his best game, but we still won anyways. Trace Jackson-Davis was spectacular. And again, I can't stress it enough. We out-rebounded Michigan State. We made them look like the smaller team. And if we're going to win games this year, I think Archie said it in the post-game press conference after Michigan State. Like, if we win games, it's going to be because of our rebounding and our ability to get second chance points. So props to the team for coming out and laying it on Michigan State, because it was really fun to watch.
It's of course hard to kind of transition from the most recent game, because I had to go back and try and look at the box score and remember what actually happened, since the most recent game was Maryland. I'm sure all of you listening are going to have to remember what game happened with this, but as I'm looking through to refresh us, Nathan, this was more of the game of Joey Brunk and Trace Jackson-Davis down low. There wasn't a very high-scoring game. You had Al Durham, one of his better offensive games as of recent, and then, of course, like Matt said, this was Rob Finney's. Again, another incredible performance defensively against Cassius Winston.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll take it a step further, you guys. I thought that win on Thursday night for IU was a really big deal for Archie Miller. Like, he deserved a gold star for his coaching performance that Thursday night, because Indiana did everything that Archie Miller set out for them to do. They showed strength in numbers. They showed that commitment to defense and rebounding, like you said, Matt. Yeah. And then, think of the guys that made a difference. You mentioned Durham, but let's set him aside for a second. It was the in-state guys that Archie Miller went after. Rob Finney, Trace Jackson Davis, Armand Franklin had a couple of big shots. And then there was Joey Brunk, who Southport High School, Butler transfer. It's Indiana guys who went out there and found a way to claw by Michigan State. And the crowd was awesome. Al Durham's big three at the end was huge. And IU found a way to get a big win in a close game, and there's going to be a lot of them coming up.
For sure.
All right. So there's not – I guess we could talk a little bit more about Michigan State, but we can kind of build that off of into the Maryland game. And I mentioned earlier that is it safe to agree, both of you guys, would you agree that this Maryland loss was not like the game against Arkansas or the game against Rutgers or even performances like Northwestern, even though it was a win? Is it fair to say that this was a loss that was much different than the end of December and early January?
Yeah, Nathan, you can take this one, but yeah, I do think it's not like the Arkansas game at all.
I agree as well, Matt. I mean, Indiana showed an incredible amount of toughness in this game. They hit a big number of outside shots, and really after a slow start, they straightened the things out. And hey, at the end of the day, Maryland just made an extra play to win it. Indiana can hold their heads up high, and they need to, right? This is going to be a test of their mental toughness. I think the Indiana team from November or December, maybe a little bit rattled by a loss like that. But I think this team changed around that Northwestern game. I think they're a lot tougher now. I think they're a little bit more battle tested right now. And I don't think they'll let a loss like this affect them long term. Not guaranteeing any wins or anything coming up, but I think they're a steadier group. They're a steadier team than they were maybe a month or two ago.
Absolutely. And we had a really good shooting performance against Maryland. I want to say the ball was going in the basket. We were getting buckets. All right. Everybody was, until the last 2 minutes of the game when we dried up and didn't execute in the half court. And I think that's what cost us in the end. I honestly believe, and when I look back on this Maryland game, missing Race Thompson for this game really hurt the team. We didn't talk about him when we talked about Michigan State. I'm going to bring him up now. He had 4 points and 4 rebounds in that game, but he made a lot more of an impact on stuff that didn't make the stat sheet, right? There's so many times where he's hustling for a ball or just fighting in the post. I know Forrest Gray in the chat just said toughness. Yeah, that is Race Thompson. He is toughness personified. And he, again, had a bad fall, fell on his lower back, was out of the game. I heard Archie said something earlier today that he's probably going to be missing the game on Wednesday against Penn State. We could use him when he gets back, and hopefully for him to stay healthy, because this team plays a lot better defensively when he is in the rotation. And then again, jumping from Race Thompson, we'll jump to Jalen Smith of Maryland. I think something that we've seen, especially with our post defenders, is the pack line, if you don't have a very mobile center, struggles when you hedge the ball screens to get back to stretch 4s and 5s. Jalen Smith is probably one of the best stretch big men in the country. You can go and look at the guy at Iowa. Yeah. What's his name? Luka Garza at Iowa is one of the best ones. And we got a home game against him coming up soon. And I know Nathan was in the Slack channel worried about how we're going to play against him when we play him. And that's a fair concern. But Jalen Smith is an NBA prospect through and through. He's going to be playing many years in the NBA. It's a 6'11" big man that can shoot the three, put it on the floor. He's pretty athletic as well. So I'm excited for him and his future, just as a basketball fan. But 29 points, 11 rebounds, and the post players got to be kicking themselves if they let a guy come on their floor and get 29 and 11. So look for our post defenders to go out against pretty good bigs that Penn State has on Wednesday or tomorrow. I guess it's tomorrow, and have a much better performance defensively.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't necessarily think that Indiana has turned the corner 100% to where we're not going to see a game or two the rest of the way where they do look like Rutgers or Nebraska. I think there's still going to be a game or two down the stretch that they're going to lose and lose poorly, but I think we're seeing a lot less of those performances, and we're going to see more consistent basketball play like we saw the last week and a half to 2 weeks from these guys, and that's what you want to see with a program that's building. And I think even the most optimistic fans have said that all of these are building years, and to give Archie time and to keep building a program. These are the small steps that Archie and the program has to take to see improvement, and these are improvements. Now they've still got 12 or however 11 or 12 games left on the season to show for it and see if they can get in the tournament. But these are the steps they're taking. The last couple of years, Indiana hasn't gotten to 15 wins this quickly. Usually they were getting to 15 wins and 16 wins in March, and trying to get a final stretch of couple wins to try and make the tournament. So these are the small steps that they're taking. I think that's hopefully going to, at least consistently, if they don't have a major fallout, that we can see improvement at least in year 3 for Archie. But more specifically, getting into the Maryland games, of course the beginning of the game and then most of the game was we're going to remember it by the shooting performance from especially both teams. And
yes.
there was a question that I'll have to find the specific question that we got on, I think it was Twitter earlier, asking about the defenses and why the pack line is its one weakness is that it gives a little more looks or open looks from the 3-point line than maybe other defenses. It doesn't necessarily mean, I think that's also a misconception that the pack line defense is going to always be poor against 3-point defenses. It's just that has a tendency for that specific thing to happen if they're not on their game. If it basically the pack line defense is going to try and minimize the open shots and try and at least get a hand in their face for them to make it and knock down those shots. But of course, the first, I think 2 things have to happen to see the shooting performance Maryland had, making 9 for 14, and I think it was like 10 or 12 minutes at the very opening of the game. 2 things have to happen. I think the defense, they don't have to be playing extremely poorly, but they definitely could be playing better, to say the least. And then Maryland also has to be hot. You can't make 9 3-pointers, basically 1 every minute, without feeling it and having the hot hand. No matter what your defense is doing, you still don't make 9 3-pointers without Maryland having the hot hand. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Matt, on that, because that was a huge thing to start out the game, and that's a thing that I think is going to start lingering as we find ways that this team can improve. And since they're trending in the right direction, how can they continue to improve? And I think that's one of the things that Hoosier fans are going to start to not necessarily latch on to, but talk about a lot, because we've seen really good shooting performances from the opponents, whether it's in Assembly Hall or on the road. We've seen a lot of really good shooting performances, and the question is that the other team happening to get hot, or is that an answer or a question from the defense giving up some of these shots? So how did you see the reaction that this defense was giving up all of those 3-pointers? And then more importantly, what did you see Indiana change the rest of the game as the shooting performance from Maryland, of course, changed from there on out?
Yeah, I think it's all about defensive pressure, right? And especially with 3-point shooters, what do you want to disrupt? You want to disrupt their rhythm, right? You want to get them out of rhythm. When you get any of these guys, any college basketball player, any Division I basketball player can sit there and take a rhythm jump shot with no hand in the face and make it. That's what they're there for. That's why they have a scholarship. That's why they're playing basketball. What you have to do is you have to, 1, contest the catch of the pass, and then 2, hand down, man down, right? You don't get your hand up, he's going to have an easy shot. And I think I know that especially in the beginning of the game, there was late closeouts. So hand down, man down, they had an open view of the basket. 1. 2, there was no pressure on the pass. Pass got perfect right into the shooting pocket. They had an easy rhythm jump shot. What changed in the second half was guys were closing out faster. They stressed more about the 3-point shot. We gave up some easy kind of run-ins to the basket. We had some people get into the lane, like Jalen Smith did on the last play. But the closeouts to the 3-point line were much better. We also didn't hedge as hard on ball screens. Joey Brunk didn't come out all the way. He kind of came out 3/4 of the way, made sure he could have enough space to recover. And that adjustment is great in game if they start hitting, jump shots. And props to the team. We were down 14 in the first half, came back and shot our way back into the game. Like, they were shooting well and we were shooting well. And I am fine if they're shooting well and we're shooting well, because as long as we're trading baskets, that's fine, because I believe in our post players to play enough post defense to break that average. But no, it's just they gotta come out with some defensive intensity, like, straight off the bat. Otherwise, we're gonna see a lot more of those performances.
And a little more specifically, Nathan, I found the Twitter question that we got when we sent out questions to you guys earlier. And Kimberly asked, why would you run an offense that consistently puts Trace Jackson Davis at the top of the key? Why are you not using Joey and Trace to their oh wait, that must not have been the specific question. Anyway, there was another question that oh, there it is. What's up with guarding the three, from Brent? The hedging outside by the bigs are causing the wings to have to drop down the lane, leaving the wide open threes. When does Miller change this defense?
I don't think he's going to change it. Like, I'm sorry, Brent. This is what it is. Indiana allows 42% of attempts, field goal attempts, coming from three. So the 3-point rate that IU allows is 42%. And on Sunday, Maryland shot over half their field goals from three. So that's how it is. That's just how it is with this defense. And and ideally it gets fixed going forward.
Sure. And I'm sorry Nathan feels bad, as you can hear with all of that. But Matt, I'll kick it to you over for a little more detail. But I think what Nathan was saying was completely correct. He's not going to change it. There are going to be performances where the opposing team is going to be able to get hot. But the point that the fans that were not getting upset on Twitter when Maryland was making all of those shots were saying, trying to at least calm the other fans down and say, this needs to change, blah, blah, blah. The normal Twitter outburst right at the immediate reactions on Twitter. Right. And so some of the people trying to calm them down was saying, it's like, hey, I'd rather give up a much less likely of a shot, a shot that would go in. I can't speak today, guys. I'm sorry. They would most likely give up. They would rather give up a chance of a much longer shot that has a less chance to go in than layup, which is 100% what the definition of the pack line defense is. Now, of course, the specific stuff you were talking about earlier is how they have to change it, because you're going to have to change something if you're going down by 14 if the other team is making that many 3-pointers. But to their credit, they were able to fight back in the game, and like you said, they were able to make some shots. And I think more importantly, they didn't necessarily cut that deficit down 100% of the way with making threes. They only made 9 threes at the end of the day, and when Maryland made 9 in the first 12 minutes, you would think that they're going to have to make 10 or 15 to be able to come back from that lead. Right. But I think what impressed me the most was how they didn't lose any confidence, which is something we saw lacking earlier this month. They didn't lose confidence. They were able to fight back and chip away at that lead, like you would normally see a team try and chip away at a lead. And how can Indiana, Matt, kind of use that to their advantage, and how can they have more of that philosophy or mentality when they get down going against some of these road teams this week?
I mean, they're just going to have to go out there and fight, right? And I think that's what we saw like this week, right? It's no matter who they're playing against, whatever, like no matter what the jersey was, it was Michigan State, it was those ugly Maryland jerseys, like whoever they were going up against, they were trying their hardest and they were making sure they were guarding on defense for most of the game. Maryland got out to a hot start because they weren't very focused on defense, but then they got focused on defense in the second half, and the results showed, because we almost pulled off that win. We were like this close, quite literally, from Trey Jackson-Davis hitting game-winning shot there. But it's honestly and to continue your point, you just talked about the pack line defense. And people are like, change the hard hedges on screens, right? But if you go and watch Virginia, you go and watch Arizona, you go watch any other team in college basketball that runs the pack line defense, you're going to see the same defensive set, right? For Virginia, you're going to see Diakite come out on the ball screen, right? The opposing big sets a screen, opposing guard, let's say it's Duke. So Trey Jones comes over the screen from what's his name for Duke that I'm losing, their center.
Vernon Carey.
I want to say Marvin Bagley, but that's not. Vernon Carey. Vernon Carey sets the screen. Trey Jones comes over. Diakite will come all the way, slide all the way out, and make sure that Trey Jones can't go over that screen. When he does, he hedges the screen and forces Trey Jones to pass out of the screen. He forces him to not roll to the big. He forces him to pass. If they're going from the left to the right, he forces them to pass to the left. That is what a hard hedge on a screen is. And you'll see Joey come out and he'll put his arms out, right? And he'll stretch out to make him have to go further over the screen. That's a hedge. That is part of a principle of the pack line defense, which is forcing them to not have an easy drive. Because if you go over the screen and Trey Jones gets around, and you don't hedge the screen, then it's Trey Jones on Joey Brunk, and that's a mismatch. Or Trey Jones on Diakite. That's a mismatch. And so that's what the pack line defense tries to stop. Now, at the end of the game at Michigan State, you saw a little bit of a wrinkle that Archie threw in, which is that he switched on the ball screen. So Tom Izzo did a ball screen. Cassius Winston comes over. I think it was Trey Jackson-Davis and Rob Valencia in the ball screen. They switched immediately. And Cassius Winston was confused. He didn't know what to do. And that's why he drove into the lane that he saw was open, but then was closed from behind by Trey Jackson-Davis. I think that's a little something that we'll see. He won't change it entirely throughout the game, but in situational defensive situations, we will see him change it. And that is something I'm really proud about Coach Miller, is because he sees that the pack line defense, while it works 95% of the time, there's a 5% of situations where it's susceptible to getting scored on. So he knows situationally, hey, they're going to try to, exploit this here. And he changed it up. So props to Coach Miller for doing that in the Michigan State game.
And I specifically think both in the Michigan State and the Maryland game that this is a reason why this team is trending in the right direction. And correct. I think we used the words in the title "trending" very carefully, because trending can obviously go away. So we're just talking about currently how the team is trending in the right direction, and we'll see how they perform this week. But as soon as Archie has found, at least I think we can all agree, even the most pessimistic fans can agree, that Archie has found some sort of footing the last 2 weeks with this team. There's something that is starting to click with him and click with the players. And you can now see the type of success that Archie can have when the program is starting to get on the right track and is starting to trend in the right direction. And this is exactly what you were saying, Matt, is the kind of stuff is why Archie was successful at Dayton, and why you're starting to see some games where Archie can have success at Indiana, is because he's able to make some of those adjustments, and he's able to see what this team is doing and the specific things, and the coaching mind that he has that he can change. It was the kind of, and you mentioned that specific thing with Michigan State. I'll mention the specific changes with Maryland. Again, 9 of 14, the Maryland team ended up going 12 for 29. They ended up going 3 for 15 after that. So something changed. It wasn't necessarily it was the players, but Archie was able to change some things schematically, and he was able to get a couple more things out of the players to change it, and it was especially apparent at halftime. And that's the kind of changes that you saw from Archie was Bill Belichick-esque, which whenever you, of course, see the Patriots go into halftime and then come out with something completely different so that they can turn it around against you. That was the kind of coaching game that Archie had against Maryland. And if it wasn't for a last-minute lapse, which we've got Forrest talking in the chat, earlier he was talking about how he thinks that was the players and not Archie specifically, specifically, which we'll get into more in a second. But you did see the way they were able to chip out at the lead. He was able to tell the players, hey, we're still going to give up some more open looks, but we can't get to the ball that late. When you're going around the screens, you got to get a hand quicker in the face. You got to do this, you got to do that, without getting into too many specific details and having a very long run on sentence for me. But those are the kind of games that you like to see from the staff, and I will just give our Archie credit. I'll give the staff more credit for some of that stuff.
Yeah, he had a great week. I mean, Archie really deserves a lot of credit. I think he's improved as a basketball coach in game over the last 3 weeks. He switched screens a lot against Maryland also, and that helped stunt their 3-point shooting a little bit towards the end of the first half. So, yeah, as long as Archie and the coaching staff keep, making those tweaks when things aren't going well. Another interesting trend this week, Armand Franklin, he was kind of a slump buster this week, right? When we see those scoring droughts that IU faces quite a bit, it's Franklin who, interestingly enough, he's the one, even though he's a freshman, he comes in and he's the one that hits the big shot.
Spark. Yep.
Right. So, these are the kind of things that hopefully the coaching staff is learning here as we head into a really tricky stretch.
Which is exactly why now, and this is why Archie does not like 10-man rotations. You can see why he now likes the 7-man rotations, because the last 2 weeks going into every single game, it wasn't just us. It was him obviously being and publicly saying, I don't know what I'm getting from specific players until the ball is tipped off. And that's why he doesn't like the 10-man rotation. But to the other side, this is how the 10-man rotation actually helps, because to Nathan's point, Armand might not have had the majority of the season hasn't been nearly impressive for him, I guess. But then there are a bunch of games where he's been able to break out, and he's been that spark and that guy that has been game-changing, literally game-changing for this team. And that's how you get to see a bunch of different performances, because Jerome Hunter, specifically, if we're going to be harsh on him, has been much to be desired. Of course, there are extenuating circumstances, but if you didn't know any of them, there's been a lot to be desired from him. And then you get this kind of game where you've got a complete spark, 3 from 6 from beyond the arc. And again, all of us Hoosier fans know what we can get from him and the specific stuff that we know is there. But I'm just talking about game to game. This is the kind of performance that is definitely the plus side when things are clicking and you've got a 10-man rotation. But before we get into that last 65 seconds, Nathan, who won the week for you this past week for IU Sports?
Yeah, it was a close race, and then last night happened.
Yeah.
And then last night, Eric Gordon, the former Hoosier who played here, I think in 2007, he lit up the Utah Jazz on a night where Harden and Westbrook were out for Houston. He scored 50 points, a career high. Became the first Hoosier to score 50 in an NBA game. It was an incredible performance from Gordon. It was stunning to see. I mean, he looked like he was a rookie out there. He was flying to the rim. He was dunking on people, hitting threes. I don't know what the expectations are for Gordon this year, but he'll always have this night to remember for the rest of his career. 50 points, an incredible accomplishment. 7th guy in the NBA to do it this year. The rest of them are pretty much all-stars, and D'Angelo Russell, who I think he was an all-star once upon a time, maybe. So awesome night for Gordon as Houston continues their playoff push.
And Nathan, hopefully next week we can talk about your who won the week. It can be the one Tevin Coleman, and hopefully, at least for his sake, he can literally have won the week because he won the biggest game in football. But is there for Hoosier fans that aren't updated with the NFL and checking Tevin Coleman's injury status, do you have an update specifically for how he might be going into this week?
My understanding is they didn't even practice last week. So like I'm sure for those of you that play fantasy football, you see those practice updates on Twitter. I think those will start coming probably tomorrow as we see whether Coleman can play or not.
Yeah, but it's been quieter than you might typically see, at least for this is recorded obviously Tuesday evening, so there could be something out by then. But let's get into the final 65 seconds. And I think this loss lingered with me. Of course, there were other emotions running through me and running through all of us at the exact same time. But this was a game that lingered longer than normal. A lot of other games, all of us have we're fans, we're fanatics. We have a big emotional attachment to this. And recently, I'd been good about getting past the immediate loss and trying to look at how they can do stuff and maybe not becoming emotionally attached right after the game. But this was definitely not one of them, because that optimistic side going 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. Oh my goodness, they could do this. They could get. We talked about statement wins last week. They could get 2 ranked victories at home this week. They could be 16-4. They could be only 4 wins away with however many games left on the season, 11, 12 games, 12 plus games with the tourney coming up. All they'd have to do is get 4, and like we talked about odds last week, it'd just be that much better. And oh my gosh, they could actually be ranked this year, because we were talking about being ranked. If they weren't ranked at the end of December, they weren't going to be ranked at all, just because of the amount of losses they were going to have. And again, all my run-on sentence is describing the emotions that we had in the final 3 or 4 minutes, and then the final minute of the game happened, where Maryland, I think it was a combination of a bunch of things. But Matt, what did you see in that final minute as Maryland kind of got hot? Indiana might have got a little lackadaisical, and just literally the last 14 seconds, the entire game was snatched up from under us when it felt like Indiana deserved the victory at that point.
We lost the game when we put the ball in crunch time in Devontae's hand. I love Devontae Green as a person, and as I love to watch him when he's playing well as a basketball player. But at some point in that second half, I want to say about 6 minutes left, Devontae became Chuck It Devontae. It became bad Devontae. He was taking shots that weren't in rhythm. He was throwing ill-advised lobs, even though I've been asking for him to throw lobs every once in a while to Trace Jackson-Davis, because 1, it's fun to watch them go down, but 2, he's somebody that can go up and get him with the best of them. And it just turned into he was searching for mid-range shots, and who even does that anymore? Like, who takes the mid-range shots anymore? And he was
Trace does,
and he hits them. But Devontae was searching for pull-up, mid-range shots like he was Kobe. He's not Kobe. He was trying to take pull-up 3-pointers at the top of the key with 5 seconds off the shot clock. Not great look. Try to work it around, try to get into the post. Wasn't even looking to get into the post. It was just bad. And I thought at about 4 minutes left, I really thought Coach Miller was going to take him out of the game. Didn't take him out of the game, left him in there, his senior, hoping that he would, bring it on both sides of the court. And he didn't. And he kind of let us down. And I don't want to blame the whole last minute on him, because
no, it wasn't 100%.
It was 100% him, but he does have to look back on that and go, okay, I could have done this, and this better the next time I'm out there, next time in crunch time. I'm not going to sit there and do that. Nathan, you got anything else to add on this?
Well, yeah. Before I get into Nathan's thoughts, sorry, actually, I wanted to go through the play-by-play, and we don't necessarily do this very much, but a minute and 27 seconds left in the game. Devontae Green makes a layup. Hoosiers are up 76-70, and if you remember, the final score was 77-76, which means the Hoosiers didn't score at all, and of course Maryland went on that 7-0 run. So then at a minute 11, Jaden Smith makes a layup. Maryland calls a timeout. Then this is where Jerome Hunter has that turnover, which goes into the Jalen Smith steal, and then Andrew Wiggins makes the 3-point jumper. Devontae Green misses the jumper. Wiggins gets the rebound. Jalen Smith makes the layup. There's where Indiana calls the timeout, and they've got about 14.6 or whatever seconds it was. And then Trace Jackson Davis, of course, missed that last second shot, and there wasn't enough time to even get a second look at the basket. So as we see that play-by-play, Nathan, does that jog your memory much from what you're remembering in the last final minute and a half?
Yeah, it was funny because I was on my way down from press row to the locker rooms, to the media room for Archie's press conference as it happened. So that walk, Indiana was outscored by 7 points. But
oh man, you shouldn't have left your seat.
Yeah, I know, right? Seriously,
it's Nathan's fault.
The one that I want to focus on is the Jalen Smith bucket just before the end of the game, because that was the one I think Archie was most upset with. He had talked about how the communication broke down there on the pick coverage, and when that happens, especially against their best player, Jalen Smith, you're really frustrated because that was the one thing Indiana was defending pretty well all day. It was, Smith was hitting you from the outside. He was hitting you from second chance points off offensive rebounds, not so much the pick and roll game. It worked there, and I think that was the one he really regretted more than any of those other plays down the stretch.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was unfortunate when I look back on it that Jerome turnover before that led to the three, because one, Jerome hasn't been in that position a lot, especially breaking the press. He didn't play a ton of minutes against Florida State, if I recall, a team that presses a lot. And, he was having his best game as a Hoosier. He had 12 points in this game, 4 rebounds. And like we stressed, he went 3 of 6 from 3. He was really great in this game.
He just wasn't ready for that specific situation in the minutes he had played yet.
And this is something else I'm upset about with both guards, Rob and Devontae, who were on the floor at that time. You cannot let a freshman, and probably right now a true freshman in Jerome Hunter, have the ball there in the last minute of the game. You have to get it, up into the half court setting and try to get them to foul you, or at least, wind the clock down and get a good shot and work your offense. You cannot turn it over there. And then it was also unfortunate that Wiggins hit the 3-pointer, because Wiggins has been struggling from 3 this season. He was a good 3-point shooter last year. I think he's shooting about 26% from 3 this year. And he in the clutch hit it, and you're just going to have to live with that. But at the same time, I think it's just unfortunate that Jerome threw the ball away there. The guards have to be available for a pass. They just have to, you got to get in this line of sight. You got to, break away from your defender. You got to do everything possible to try to get into the field of vision of Jerome so he can have an easy outlet pass, because that was not great execution there.
If not, call a timeout or get the ball itself.
Exactly.
Since they had 2 timeouts there, which
we
thought wouldn't be. They used 2 of their timeouts in the first 5 minutes of the game, and then they ended up with 2 timeouts in the last 50 seconds of the game.
Arch is actually really good about saving his timeouts. He's the opposite of Tom Allen as far as saving timeouts.
Which, speaking of final seconds and I guess coaching decisions, basically, I know this is the last thing that we'll touch on with this game, Nathan. They've had this come up a couple times now with the end of game situations with Archie Miller and the final seconds on the clock. And it's, if Indiana is up and they're trying to kill the clock, as you typically do, but Indiana will not try and which is very NBA-esque, as most NBA teams will do, is that the last 7 or 8 seconds is when they start to make a move to the basket. Now, of course, the upside to that is you score and there's no time left anyway, and you want to just try and milk as much clock as you can. But then, of course, if you miss the shot and you get an offensive rebound, or you don't get a shot up and you're trying to get a look, and of course the clock doesn't reset, the shot clock doesn't reset, or whatever the circumstances are, there's not enough time, and that's what we saw at the end of the game, that they didn't. There was, and this wasn't the exact circumstance, but there was an urgency getting to the basket, and they ended up running out of time when they could have had an offensive rebound and then go back up to the game. So is that a coaching philosophy, the specific situation with Archie Nathan, that you agree with, or do you think they should probably start going to the basket a couple seconds earlier?
I think I'm okay with it, in all honesty. I mean, at the end of the day, they got a good look with Trace Jackson Davis inside, and that's all that matters, if you ask me.
Which, pause right there. It's kind of like the Duran Arkansas game last season. You can't really hold that again.
I don't want to reminisce about that.
And we my point was, we can't hold it against Trace, and it was just I feel bad for the guy.
No, it goes in. We celebrate like Indiana fans go crazy.
Yeah.
You missed it. Indiana fans are annoyed and upset. And Trace Jackson Davis missed it. It happens.
He makes those all the time in practice. Missed it.
Yeah, he makes those all the time during the games.
Absolutely,
fantastic move on Smith, and then just missed it.
Fantastic move on Smith with his dominant left hand over his left shoulder, and just rimmed out.
So to me, all that matters is the quality shot, because if you're chucking a 3 with 5 seconds to go and in hopes that you get a second chance, that to me
we've
is
seen
suboptimal. So
we saw last year.
It works, but it's not the play that you want to run.
No, it's not. It's a last ditch sort of heave it at the horn
Yeah.
if you have to. So good shot, just didn't go in. You try to execute that play again and hope for a better result this week, because every single game from here on out is probably going to be a nail biter.
And
Yep.
I think as we get Archie Miller to get his own recruits in more, and as his system takes place, and as the players grow older, right? And Rob becomes a sophomore to a junior to a senior. We're gonna start seeing really well run plays in the final minute. Guys that know where they're going to be and have run the play for 3 years, whether it's a pick and pop or it's a pick and roll with a side out three or whatever it is, whatever the play is, we're going to see a lot more familiarity within the system, within the offense, within the team itself and the team comp and the lineup as the players get older. And it's really positive right now that they're able to get a good shot like Trace Jackson Davis did, even though he's been in the system for only a couple months. Just imagine what Trace is going to be like next year when he comes back, or if he comes back next year and is able to get that last second shot. And maybe this time he makes it. So again, for the future, a lot of positives from this week, even though we only went 1-1 and had a very disappointing and frankly devastating loss.
Yep. Still 15-5, regardless of the outcome on Sunday. 11 games left before the Big Ten tournament. Lot of games left. A lot of games to be able to pick up those at least 5 victories, if not more. So, Matt, we'll turn it over to you for the social media shout out of the week.
Oh yeah, so social media shout out of the week obviously has to be from today. If you don't know what happened today in the football universe of things, Rodney, what's his last name? Rodney McGraw, defensive end from Elkhart, Indiana, 2021. 4-star defensive end from Elkhart, committed to the Hoosiers today. It's our first commitment in the class of 2021 for football. And it's a really big one as well. Again, he's a top 300 player. He's from Indiana. He's from Elkhart. He's a 4-star recruit. If you want to follow him on Twitter, his Twitter is at Rodney, Ney, 5161. So that's his Twitter if you want to follow him. Also, about the social media stuff, of course, they do the Leo gifts and they do the fist pump from Coach Allen, and that they all tweeted that, and I think I tweeted it multiple times today at a couple of minutes. So, football team's rolling. Other news about football, I guess we can talk about this quickly.
Yeah, I'll quickly touch on it, and we'll. Man, we just didn't leave enough time for it. Of course, everyone by now saw that Peyton Ramsey's in the transfer portal, and as one person said, it doesn't mean he's necessarily gone yet. But I think my thoughts, and I think you guys echo my thoughts. I won't kick it over to you, but it's basically just good for him. He deserves to be somewhere where he can start. He knows that Penix is the better athlete and that he's going to get the nod, especially being the younger kid. But being a guy that's tied for 5th in yards and all-time yards and touchdowns on the team, and he's only been here basically 2.5 years. Just the leadership he has, the talent ability that he's grown, the work ethic that he puts in. Congratulations to him. He deserves to go somewhere else. We shouldn't be selfish and hope that he stays just so that we have a security blanket just in case something happens to QB1 basically at the moment. So hopefully, I really do think he will find a spot that he can work for his last year of eligibility, and it is a grad transfer officially, so he'll be able to start playing right away without any investigations or whatever to eligibility stuff to try and go through it. But let's get into some quick previews of the game. We won't go into Ohio State real too much because we just played them very recently too. We played them about 2.5 weeks ago. But the big one is, of course, away at Penn State tomorrow. Now, the game is at 8:30 p.m. It is on BTN, which tomorrow, as we're recording this, is really for a lot of us today, Wednesday, January 29th. Right now, they are 22nd in Ken Palm. As we talked about last week, all of the road games are Ken Palm predicts a loss. So right now, there's a 32% chance that Indiana will win against Penn State on the road. They think the score is going to be 75-70 in terms of Penn State. And then also ESPN predicts close to the same thing. They think Indiana has a 25.5% chance of winning. But we'll do a quick preview, Matt, of what to look for against Penn State tomorrow.
Yeah, Penn State's got a couple of really good big men, and I think that we can go on and say that about every team in the Big Ten. But Lamar Stevens averaging 16.7 points per game, 7 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.5 blocks per game, shooting 73% from the line. He's about as good of a power forward as Trace Jackson Davis is going to have to play this year. Again, we just played Jalen Smith, but Jalen Smith kind of plays the 5 for Maryland. So as far as, a 4-on-4 matchup, Lamar Stevens is probably going to be the best one that Trace is going to get this year. And then against Joey, we've got Mike Watkins, who's a true center. Doesn't take any 3-pointers, hasn't attempted one, so we don't have to worry about Joey having to close out to the 3-point line. However, Mike Watkins is deadly inside. He has a 59.8% field goal percentage, which means when he shoots the ball, it's probably going in. He gets really good looks close and inside, and Penn State does a really good job of running plays for him to get him set up. He leads the team in rebounds, 7.9 rebounds per game. And then they're going to play a lot of 3-guard lineups. So Justin Smith is going to have to guard a larger guard for the most part this game. Again, a name you might find familiar, Hoosier fans, is Curtis Jones, who was on the IU team then left and went to Oklahoma State, and then left Oklahoma State and came to Penn State, who is actually playing pretty decently. He's averaging 7.4 points per game, 2.4 rebounds. Yeah, and I'm happy for him. He found a spot. He's shooting 32% from 3, which we all knew was his strong set going into IU, was his 3-point shooting. So congrats to Curtis for finding a place that he can call home. I think he was from Pennsylvania originally anyways, so good for him for finding a spot for himself. And then the last player I'm going to bring up that you're going to have to look out for is Myron Jones. He's their main guard. He's second on and averaging points on the team at 14.3. He also averages 3.1 rebounds per game. Nobody on their team averages more than 3 assists per game. So they kind of, the passing duty is, passed out, for lack of a better word, to the rest of the team. Everybody's gonna try their best to chip in and get assists. But as far as the load of scoring goes, about 31 points per game comes from the duo of Lamar Stevens and Myron Jones. So as long as one of those guys doesn't hit their season average, you're probably looking at a win for the Hoosiers.
Yep, and then the game this Saturday, rematch against Ohio State. It is away, of course. It'll be noon on ESPN this Saturday, February 1st, so right as a new month hits. So right now, currently, Ken Palm has the Hoosiers at a 26% chance of winning with a score of 71-64 in favor of the Buckeyes. They think this game will be harder for the Hoosiers compared to Penn State. ESPN 21.2% chance in terms of Indiana's hopes of winning. We've seen the kind of team Ohio State is. It's just going to be a different environment. We're going to have to see how the Hoosiers have consistently grown, and depending on their performance on Wednesday, even if it's a really good win or a bad loss, how are they going to react to that going into Columbus, Ohio, at an environment with, even if Penn State is showing up more than they typically do. I think it's safe to say that Columbus is going to be a much harsher environment compared to University Park, at least in terms of basketball. So I do want to quickly we've got a few questions. I want to do almost rapid fire answers for all of these until the last one, and I think we could have an entire podcast on the last one. But with at least at this point in the year. But Ben on Twitter, Matt says, with Ramsey likely gone, do you think they'll roll with Jack Tuttle as QB2, or could we look forward to Dexter Williams getting some playing time if Mike gets hurt again? And he definitely wanted to make sure he emphasized if, and he had a gif of knocking on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. Yeah, Jack Tuttle's the backup. I think that's why Peyton Ramsey's leaving, because he realizes that Jack Tuttle is right there approaching that backup position for him. Not that he's on Ramsey's level, but he's comparable and he's younger. So if they're going to give a backup playing time, it's going to be the younger guy, not the senior that's been there. So Jack Tuttle, good job. You're in great position. So keep it up.
Yeah, and hopefully he can keep improving, because honestly, we just hadn't seen anything with what's been going. Dennis on Facebook, any update on the status of Christian Landers playing for IU? I'll take that real quick. His recruiting has gone quietly in the last couple months, and that's not a good or a bad thing. His recruiting has just been quiet. It hasn't really changed for the better or for the worse. So that there's no real status update on that. And again, Nathan from Kyle from Facebook, any injury updates from Race?
Well, it looks like he won't be playing on Wednesday night against Penn State. It's too bad, because he was really making a major impact on the floor, but we'll see. I mean, we've whiffed on some injury news the last couple of weeks, so we'll see if he plays against Penn State. And
That's
then
true. Maybe we'll go the wrong way this time.
Yeah,
you usually say they're good, and then or they're not good, and then they end up being good. So Nathan's going to say
don't expect him to play against Penn State.
Yes, I think that's
we'll see
fair,
Saturday,
especially with the back injury he got. That's fair to him. Chad, real quick, Matt. It's clear the team is improving. If you were presented with the Maryland stat sheet after the Rutgers game, would you believe that this team came from would you believe that they came from the same team?
No.
That's a good answer. Yeah, and then our it's a pretty straightforward answer. And then Mort on Twitter, we don't have too much time to dive into this, but basically he asked, and why it could be a podcast, has the Archie program turned the corner? Nathan, in less than 60 seconds, has the Archie program turned the corner?
I don't know. They're improving. I can tell you that for sure. This team is better now than they were a month ago. Whether or not that actually translates into a lot of wins and Big Ten play is yet to be seen, because the Big Ten has a lot of really good teams, and it's gonna time will tell. But the team is improving, especially when you look at guys like Armand Franklin, Jerome Hunter, some of those younger players. They're making an impact.
Well, we better hope they have. So I think so. And for all those Archie truthers out there that think he's not great, look at his record against Michigan State. Look at his record in close games. I think this Archie Miller team has turned it around. I think we're seeing a little bit of development in the system. I think when he gets more of his guys in next year, we've seen what he's been able to do with freshman guards and especially in-state guards improving themselves in their freshman year. We have two great ones coming in next year. I think this program's in a great spot.
Yeah, my answer, I think it depends on what you think the definition of turn the program is. Because if you think turning the program is going from where it has been to national championship contender, of course he hasn't turned the program just yet. But if you think
not quite,
and then if you think in terms of his tenure here, his 3 years, that's a different answer than even this season, which are all different answers. But I think overall, I think the program is, like we've said, trending in the right direction. To yes, it is starting to turn in the right direction. Maybe it's not a quick like snap of the fingers it's turned, but it is definitely trending in the right direction. It is starting to turn, and the results we're seeing on the court is definitely improvement, I think. And it's just like we said, this is another big week that the Hoosiers need to go 1-1, and they can see, hey, are they going to be a team that's for real? Because they got almost a couple of wins this past week at home. Right. They made a statement victory and almost two statement victories. Now can you do it on the road? Because that's the ultimate test in terms of the committee's eyes, is how many road victories can you get. And definitely don't think two wins, but one win, and I definitely think we'll be happy, because like we talked about last week, if you didn't listen, go talk about it. We talked about how this team can make the tournament, basically win the home games. This is almost playing for house money when talking about the road games. So hopefully we will be back next week talking about at least one victory, and if not, it's not the end of the world. Again, it's not another week that's the end of the world just yet. But that's going to wrap it up for 126th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to that live audience for coming out and supporting us. As always, we really appreciate your support. We'll be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. News and updates, Twitter, of course. Subscribe to us so you don't miss out on all those episodes. You should hit that bell button when we go live so you can come chat with us as well. Most importantly, though, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. iTunes or Facebook, like I said, is usually the best place to do that. But we really grow this podcast by just word of mouth. So tell a friend, share our links. This is really how we grow this podcast. So if you enjoy us, just go to hq.com, copy, paste onto Twitter, say, hey, give these guys a shout out. We would really, really appreciate it. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.